Anything else in this section? So change in information. The cultivation facility licensee shall notify the commission of any changes in contact information. The cultivation facility licensee shall notify the commission in writing no less than 14 days in advance of any change that may affect the licensee's qualifications for licensure, and submit to the commission supporting documentation to prove the cultivation facility licensee continues to be qualified. In the event of a change for which a cultivation facility licensee does not have prior notice, the licensee shall notify the commission immediately upon learning of the change.
The one thing I see in here is maybe just tightening the language when we start talking about if they transfer any kind of ownership or any of the owner group, any membership interest in the entity, things like that. It talks about it, kind of, but it seems like if we could clarify that, it would be
Like selling the facility?
well, whether it's, I mean, I think selling would be the transfer, potentially. But this would be, if I had a cultivation facility LLC and all of a sudden I decided it wasn't just gonna be me anymore, but I was going to bring a partner in. I think that's part of what we want to then trigger this, because we ought to have that same language that talks about, we'd want to be able to conduct a background check on the new officer, director, board member, member of the entity, something along that line. So I feel like that's something that ought to be done. And then the question is 14 days even enough for someone to do that?
You're talking about like exchanging ownership. I mean, I would think that that would have to be approved by the commission. I mean, if 4 people own it and one guy leaves and another guy comes in, then I think they'd have to get permission from because we'd have to do the background checks, make sure they're not delinquent on taxes, et cetera, that they're the right age, they don't have felonies, et cetera. So we would have to I don't think they would be able to change the ownership without our approval, because it would fundamentally change their application.
To both commissioners' points, the next paragraph in transfer of license, if they change the ownership, it requires prior approval by the commission, including the full application suite of the tax clearance, the background check. All of that is contemplated in the transfer of license language.
So that's covered.
Yes.
But is that transfer of the license or of the ownership entity?
An entity who owns a license shall not make any modification to the entity's ownership as designated in the application without approval from the commissioners.
There it is. Okay, good.
Madam Chair, on number 15, again, what I have to go off of is pharmacy boards, but a lot of times pharmacy boards require a 10-day in advance. 14 days is a little bit more, which is fine. But a lot of times this may be whether you are adding onto your facility with a second address, whether it's next door or any sort of director. So it may not be ownership like you all are talking about, but it may be someone within the business that doesn't have ownership but is a part that we require. And if there's a change there, we would want to be notified of that.
That's a good point. So in other words, if they were the medical doctor that's been attached to the application, so or you were the pharmacist that was attached, and you're no longer going to be it for that facility, by mistake they're going to get something different. That's the change we're talking about.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah.
But wouldn't it fall under that same rule that it would change the
Well, it wouldn't change the ownership
It wouldn't change
structure.
the ownership.
Yeah, they would have no ownership.
I mean, we make people file changes of floor plan, let's say, they're gonna go in and remodel, and this is what it's gonna look like. In this context, that could be one. Maybe it could be one that they've provided you with some security plan, and they've given you some sort of alarm system, and now they're going with something completely different. So any modifications beyond their original application, they would need to run by the board.
And that could include whether it be new technology, new equipment.
New consultants,
Yeah,
So change in consultant, change in equipment, change in technology.
Change in address, obviously.